We have an amazing guest on the AI Applied podcast. He is a returning guest, and it is the famous Logan Kilpatrick. So Logan's a good buddy of ours, and I just want to sort of like kick it off. I want him to intro his new role. When last we spoke, Logan was a huge presence for OpenAI. He was sort of like he was like your non-Sam Altman go-to face of OpenAI, all over social media, quoted by all the podcasts, everything else. I'm just going to read Logan's LinkedIn post from probably the 1st of April, if I remember correctly, but it says, excited to share I've joined Google to lead product for AI Studio and support the Gemini API. Logan, you'll tell it all better than us. Tell us how you're doing and what you are up to these days, and then we're going to dive into all the amazing stuff Google has been up to.
Yeah, 100%. First of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be a reoccurring guest now on this show. I feel like I need to get my own segment, so I'll send the pitch and see how we can make that happen. But yeah, joined Google at the beginning of April to, like the post said, lead product for AI Studio. If folks don't know what AI Studio is, it's sort of the equivalent to the OpenAI playground with a little bit more robust of a feature set. So if you want to just, with writing any code, try out the new Gemini models, Gemini 1.5 Pro, for example, with the 1 million context and multimodality stuff, you can just go right into the platform, sign in with your Google account, get access. It's free. There's a free tier, which is incredibly fun, and really start to see what these models are capable of. And I think it's incredibly important, again, from perspective, like making sure folks have access to this technology and can actually test it and really sort of understand what's going to be possible. And also, if you're a developer, go and build really cool stuff, which is really Gemini.
Super, super cool. Okay, so there's a lot going on. I want to just get into the question that everyone is probably asking right now, and that it's like, you just made this big shift. You had a big, kind of prominent role at OpenAI. You're now moving over to Google. What inspired you to kind of take this position and got you, interested in making this move?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a myriad of things. One, I think just from the reality for OpenAI is the organization changed so much from when I joined. When I joined OpenAI, I was a 250 person startup.
Crazy.
And I think, it's just changed dramatically. And I think, I think for me, what was exciting to me about going to Google was the potential to help Google win the sort of every developer share space. And I think, OpenAI has done an incredible job of that. And obviously, I can't and shouldn't take all the credit for that. But I think that segment of developers are who are creating this immense amount of value in the world. And I think, there being a real competition at that layer in the developer market, I think is incredibly important. And I'm excited to hopefully help the folks at Google and the team actually really strongly compete in that. I think it's, again, OpenAI is a great platform to build with. I think it being one of the few viable platforms to build with, I don't think is the net best thing for the world. And hopefully we'll have make some headways with AI Studio and the Gemini API.
It's awesome. I want to dive into, because Google's, so much to talk about with Google, especially this week. But just sort of on the intro questions here, just to sort of get this out of the way too, culture-wise, OpenAI culture, clearly very strong. When we saw when Sam Altman got sort of ousted, essentially the entire company rallied around it. It was such an unusual culture. Google with close to 200,000 people. This huge leader in this space. I know you've only been there a couple weeks, but you must have talked to people. What attracted you about the culture of Google to sort of make that big move?
Yeah, I think the interesting dynamic of a small company and the culture at a small company is that every additional 100 people you add can actually dramatically change the culture of the company. I think it's a little bit different of a space for Google, and that they've been a large company for a while now, and there's a very established set of norms and culture across the organization. And of course that changes slightly based on, what product area you're in, et cetera. But I do think that level of stability is, can be really useful in moving quickly. I think if you have alignment and it's established what the expectations are, I think it in many ways helps you avoid some of the challenges of as you're scaling and having to deal with that stuff. I also think like just broadly, like Google has a rich history of innovation in the AI space. Like most of the cool stuff that we all benefit from an AI perspective came from Google. And historically, a lot of that was focused on research. And I think in the last few years has been really focused on how to bridge the gap between research to actually putting this technology in the hands of consumers and developers, which is incredibly excited. And I also say like a hard transition to make. And I think the Google DeepMind folks are doing an incredible job of still pushing the research forward while having, the idea that like the hope is to actually get this technology into the hands of real people and change their lives and improve things for them.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's so much potential here. And like you mentioned, so much of the innovation in AI is from Google. My question here, Google obviously is a massive company, a ton of innovation. AI has been going back very far for them. But they're not the only player in the space. There's a number of other players. What I'd love to hear your perspective on is like, what's one thing that Google's really kind of crushing it on as far as AI goes that you're excited about? And what's one area that you hope to help them improve on? One area that you think they could, they could become stronger in?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think the two places from like a modeling capability that I think Google is really shining right now is large context. I think 1 million context is super cool. It's a little bit flashy and in some sense, like, that you, from a technical perspective, it begs the question, like, do you really want to use 1 million context? Like that's an open question. But the cool thing is like, you can use it if you need to, if your use case requires that. And also the native multimodality support. So I think the models can take in, videos, image, audio, all these things, which makes it so that, again, in other developer ecosystems, you kind of have to like, hodgepodge put together like a bunch of different APIs to basically do what Gemini 1.5 Pro does like out of the box, which is interleave all these things together and be able to understand and process all of them. So I think that's like a huge value add for developers to not have to use like 5 or 6 different APIs and actually pay the round trip cost of like setting a request, waiting for a response, transcribing something, and then feeding it back into another model. Like that whole process ends up making it so that like you can't really use that technology to build like a consumer product experience because people are like, wait, what am I? I'm still sitting here waiting for my thing. It's like the challenge of time to first token, like on steroids because of like how many different API calls you need to make. I think the place that we have a lot of work to do is like making, in many ways, like the beauty for OpenAI and why it's so nice is because they have a green field. There's no existing legacy brands around developers or other things. I think the challenge for Google is like there are a immense amount of actually really strong developer brands from Vertex AI on the cloud side to TensorFlow and Keras and JAX and Firebase and like massive developer ecosystems that Google is already operating. And it is a much more difficult problem space to be like, how do you slot this new thing into this like much broader ecosystem versus, hey, let's just go and build this thing from scratch and then, we get to do whatever we want basically. So I think those are the challenges that I'm dealing with and like getting the messaging to developers right so that when you show up, you see this cohesive vision of the different products and services that Google offers. And also it is abundantly clear where the entry point is to use AI. Because I think that is the thing that developers are most excited about right now is how can I build AI into my website, my Android app, my whatever it is. And if the path to get to that point is not clear, people are just going to go and choose another platform. So we have to make that for developers clear. And I think we have more work to do in that space.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear actually from your point of view on that. And this is sort of like also what I want to get to. I mean, and I'm going to be speaking for a second just from a pure consumer AI observer standpoint, not from people who are inside these sort of systems. But like Google seems to really, again, pure observer, Google seems to like be really turning it around public perception wise over the last few weeks or couple of months. Like, so I got early access to 1.5 Pro and I wrote about it right away because I'd been sort of down on Google. I'd been like, okay, this is actually really, really good. But, last year was a bummer of a year for Google from an AI perspective, from the observer perspective, probably not internally, but just, it was sort of like there was so much expectation. And then the demos kind of got like, people were like, oh, this isn't going well, all that kind of stuff. And yet it's Google. And yet the product was very similar all along. And now Gemini is just like, feels like it's starting to blow it out of the water a little bit in like a really positive way. Like, can you speak a little bit to sort of like, what's that like I know you weren't there for it, but just in terms of Was that sort of just a matter of, and Jaden and I talk about this a lot, like we expect so much from Google. Like we expect everything that comes out of Google to be like the new, like we're going to call it Gmail, we're going to call it Googling, all that kind of stuff. What was that like internally? Did you get any sort of sense about like just the weight of expectations, and then when you're only kind of keeping pace, like what that can feel like?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different elements at play, and I think in many ways, and I don't think this is just the case for Google. I think like ChatGPT was the wake up call that, hey, we need to like the success of that product, and then the success subsequently of the developer product around ChatGPT and the OpenAI API, I think was the wake up call to a lot of people in the industry that like, hey, we need to go and do this stuff. And I think my expectation and like my view from the outside and not having any internal perspective of what was happening behind closed doors is basically a lot of people just ended up having to scramble really quickly to try to catch back up to the place in which it was clear some of the other people in this space were actually at. And I think that just leads to a lot of internal hecticness, but I also think like in some of the way in which the products are actually released into the world, like you can sort of see some of that friction and like some of the desire to move really quickly and like maybe not have figured out like, this is the Gmail or this is the Google of how people are going to use AI, but really like taking a more incremental approach to getting there. And I think it takes time to build great products. It takes time to be thoughtful about how to do this. And I'm excited that like the trajectory of where we're going right now feels like we're going to get there. Like I think the first party product on the Gemini side has gotten super good. Like I actually use it all the time now on my phone when I ask questions. I was just watching one of the Star Wars movies recently, like the 7, 8, 9 Star Wars movies. And I was asking a bunch of questions because like kind of, I don't know if folks have seen those movies. It's kind of, they're kind of debated in the Star Wars community or just like the movie community in general. It's like very confusing. I'm like, how is Palpatine still alive? Like how did he just build like a 50,000 fleet starship on like the underground on a planet? I'm like, this doesn't really make sense to me.
It's the big questions of a universe. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was literally asking those questions to Gemini, and it was doing an incredible job of giving me answers and interleaving references. And I was trying to understand, and it actually made the movie experience much more enjoyable because normally the first time I saw the movies, I was just skeptical and confused and not really understanding like, this is just dumb. These movies are dumb. But I think once you start to understand like some of the context, and I didn't have that context from actually watching the movie, it made it much easier. So all that's to say, like, I'm super excited about the path that we're on. I think the Google leadership team knows this. I think the internal teams at Google are like incredibly excited about the prospect of bringing this technology to consumers and developers. So yeah, it's going to be a great 2024 and beyond.
Awesome.
That's super exciting. Talking about some of the products being built in the space right now. OpenAI originally came out with OpenAI, the ChatGPT plugins. I feel like maybe it was Sam Altman or someone who said he didn't feel like the plugins really achieved product market fit or something. They kind of pivoted and did the GPT store. I'd love to hear your perspective on how you felt the GPT store was kind of going, and if you feel like Google or other players might try to emulate some of those similar, strategies or products. As obviously OpenAI kind of a leader in the space and they came out with this thing. Is this something that we're going to see at other places? How is that going there? Just love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when that article or blog post or whatever it was came out, that was something with Sam said that I was talking to Sam, and it was abundantly clear that like the context was taken. It was for sure taken out of context. I think it was like we're still early in the process and like still have a lot more to do. I actually think in many ways, like people really liked plugins. It was clear like there was a lot of work that needed to be done to make that product experience better. But I think ultimately it did find product market fit. Like the GPT store is the iteration. It is like, you could have rebranded it to plugins V2 if you really wanted to, but I think the GPTs is potentially a little bit stronger of a brand name. So ultimately it did find that product market fit. And I think specifically the product market fit that has been most clear, and I think this is like the broad problem in AI ecosystem, which is you show up in one of these AI tools that can do anything. And if the use case isn't extremely tangible, it's not clear how to use it. It's like the blank page writing problem. And the thing that I really like about GPTs and other equivalents is that, again, people don't like average everyday people, if you grab them off the street and you ask them about the problems that they have in their life, they don't talk about, I have these problems that are like AI problems. They're like, I have like a very specific, tangible problem. And GPTs are a manifestation of packaging up a very specific, tangible problem into an AI interface and solving that problem. And I think it's like that is how you get people to the aha moment of this technology really can solve my problems much faster than them having to like figure that out themselves through a chat UI. And my expectation is like that is the trend of where the industry is going to go. Like forcing people into a chat UI and having them try to figure out their problems is like not the most user-friendly thing to do.
Yeah, this is such a huge point. And Logan, you and I have talked about this in sort of like other forums, just about like, you know, and Jaden, you and I have talked about this as well. Like one of the reasons I do kind of like what I do at NYU Stern is just because it's like when I first discovered this, like my wife who was in AI at McKinsey was like, just use it. But the brain doesn't work that way. It's just like use it. And I love what you say about like, you know, this is, you know, if you told everybody ChatGPT was a negotiating machine, everybody would use it, and an email machine, everybody would, but like just the anything machine is very hard to come to grips with. And maybe just to pick up on that for a second, like this was this phenomenal thing out of the Information today. Actually, I don't have the title of it, but it was by John Victor and Anissa Gardizzi. Anyway, I was just going to read the first couple of paragraphs. I just want you to react to this. So in his keynote speech at Google's annual cloud computing conference Tuesday, Google Cloud CEO Thomas Kurian outlined a future in which businesses use AI agents to automate all manner of tasks, from analyzing data to creating ad copy to prodding consumers to spend more money. Now he must get customers to follow his lead, and that's proving to be a challenge. Many are just experimenting with AI. Those deploying it more widely are using it for relatively mundane tasks like summarizing correspondence, blah, blah, blah. Increasingly aware of AI's limitations, many customers are moving cautiously. So Logan, it kind of speaks to that point, right? It sort of speaks, and I'm wondering, sort of from your perspective, you're in this interesting role of like, you know, a relationship manager, right? And I think you were the first one on the developer front for OpenAI, and now you have that role at Google. Like, how do you get this out there? Is it through developers who are developing things that sort of like people understand how to use it, or like, and how is Google thinking about it? It's a huge issue because you can have all the tech. To your point, you can have this amazing tech, but how do you relate it to people?
Yeah, I think this comes back to one, my vision has long been that like developers are the way that you bring this technology to the world. I think in the context of, you know, the nice thing for Google is like Google actually does have like global world distribution. Like there's many billions of people who use the Google product suite. So you could actually, from a first party perspective, deliver that experience and like change the world for consumers. I think in general, though, the framework of developers are going to be the people who sort of bring AI to the world is my mental model for this. We're still so early in this. I also think there's like just specifically on the agents point, I think there's a lot of things that need to be figured out still. Like there's a ton of startups that are trying to tackle this problem. Mm-hmm. I think Vertex AI has a new agent builder, which is what you were alluding to that Thomas launched next. But it's also clear that like the thing that prevents agents for the most part from working really well is that they're not robust and reliable. And you need robustness and reliability to actually take those agent workflows into production settings. And it's still not clear to me today that like just engineering the right system will get you that without some like model innovation to like help make these agent workflows better. I think the asterisk on that and like a good potential counterpoint to my thesis is like Cognition Labs with the AI software engineer with Devin. That's a great example of like where it appears they were actually able to get this like, you know, coding AI agent workflow to be much more robust and reliable purely from an engineering standpoint. At least from my point of view, like it's not clear that they've like solved some like AI machine learning problem. It is like how to wire up all the systems correctly such that the system can be solved. So it'll be interesting. Like maybe my guess is it'll be a blend of both of these things. Like there's a bunch of like engineering problems that still need to be solved. Hopefully new iterations of models that are faster, smaller, more intelligent, all those things will enable agents to really take off. But I don't think that we're there yet. Like, and I think it's clear from like consumers, like most consumers don't have an agent doing anything for them today. Like they might use ChatGPT or one of these other tools, but like we haven't actually gotten to the point. And I tweeted something the other day of like asking what the platform will be that actually is like the first one to have consumer success with agents. And I looked through a bunch of the things that people suggested, but it's not clear that we're at that point yet.
Logan, what is the area that you are the most excited about in AI maybe this year? Is it, video and some of the tools coming out? Is it around development tools? Is it around agents? Like, what is the big thing people have been talking about? You'll be able to direct your own movie with Sora or some of these other video tools. Like, what's the big thing that you're excited about this year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think broadly speaking, my perspective is like text is still the most economically productive thing that you can generate with these models. I think videos are like really cool. Like I think that all the Sora stuff is like incredibly interesting. And it seems like potentially that's a part of like getting to another level of reasoning of understanding the world around us because of like the physics that's involved with that. And I don't think, maybe the text models like can't understand that as well as a video model could. So potentially that's like part of, the path to AGI, if you will. But still, like I think for the average developer or consumer, like text is the way in which they interact with the world. Like if I had Sora today, like I don't actually think it would solve it's not going to solve any of my problems. Like I can make videos, which is cool, but like what I really want is like amazing text assistants and voice assistants that I can direct and then they can go out and do things for me. And I think that is going to be enabled by like model innovation. Like we're going to have more models this year that are going to make all of those use cases better, faster, cheaper, more reliable, more robust. And it really feels like there's so many use cases that are on the cusp of just like working really well out of the box. And I think my hope is like, and I don't know if this will actually happen, but like the next iteration of these models will be the things that get us over that hump so that like so many more, like you think back to the transition from 3.5 to GPT-4, the order of magnitude of use cases that are unlocked was huge. And I think the same thing is going to be true for the Gemini models now. And I'm sure for whatever models OpenAI puts in, but that gets me really excited.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, 2024. I agree. I think it's one of these things like now it's competing, AI music, and this is the ChatGPT for music. No, this is the chat. Like even in the last couple of weeks, sort of like it's changed, and then even today, like GPT-4 Turbo kind of like overtook in the leaderboard. So there's always like incremental things. But to your point, at least what I see out in the world is like people are still just struggling to be like, I'm just trying to get my day done. Do you know what I mean? Like, how can I get my day done faster? And it's phenomenal. Speaking in front of like lots of people, like 80% of people aren't really using these tools very effectively. And I'm wondering sort of like from the developer side, it felt like, when we knew Google would be coming out with something, so call it like a year ago, right? I guess at that point, Bard had sort of launched about a year ago. But, I think the big excitement around that was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be integrated into the Google ecosystem. And the Google ecosystem is no joke, man. It's like Apple and Google, right? I mean, Microsoft is a little bit like your parents' ecosystem. I don't know, shade to them. Microsoft's great. But you know what I mean? Like these are the exciting ecosystems. And I mean, like how much are developers going to sort of like play a role in that? Because I think that the early wrappers and everything else were like, hey, this is AI for Excel and, $50 million invested. And then, OpenAI rolled over them. But is it Google sort of like taking control of that? Or are you like relying on developers, or how do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's somewhat of an open question. Like you could imagine like what the equivalent plugin developer ecosystem looks like in the context of Google's ecosystem. I don't think like the work has really like started in that sense. Like I think there's still a lot that has to be figured out. And my hope is that will happen. Like that is in some sense, like that's what Microsoft is doing. Like Microsoft has built similarly to plugins. They have like plugins for Microsoft 365 and the whole suite so that you can integrate across it and have different AI tools and services helping you along the way. And I think that's going to be an incredibly interesting opportunity. It'll also be somewhat interesting to see like how that plays from like a very large first party product. Like I think in many ways, like it's a different position than OpenAI because Google has so many has such a large user base already using these products that it's like, how can you provide them this really cool, interesting experience augmented by AI without it like being annoying. I think there's a lot of like, it would be really easy to like build a product experience, just slap a little AI on it, and you're like, well, this doesn't really help me that much. So I think doing it in a really thoughtful way and making sure it provides people value is like the high level goal. And I think that's maybe why you've seen Google move slightly slower and like getting AI into the whole suite of products. Like just slapping AI into things is easy to do. I think building the right product experience for a lot of people is a much harder problem space to solve.
Mm-hmm. So true. Logan, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really appreciate your perspective. As you are heading out, you have this really unique perspective, so I would be, remiss if I didn't ask you, what is one piece of advice that you could give to developers that are building in this space right now, based off of your unique perspective at OpenAI and now at Google, and really kind of seeing the inner workings of these companies?
I think historically, up until probably like this week, literally, the multimodal use cases were just like not feasible for developers. In the world of OpenAI, it was sort of in separate. There was like two different models that you would have to sort of interleave together: the vision model and the text model. 1.5 Pro on the Google side had yet to actually be rolled out to the world within the waitlist. So this week is like the first week that you can actually go and start to build these really robust multimodal use cases, which I'm incredibly excited about. I think back to when I was a machine learning engineer at Apple and spent a year of my life training a bunch of computer vision models to help in the Apple Store assess the cosmetic value of phones during the trade-in process, and making sure that was consistent across all of Apple, so that you wouldn't go to one store and then get one value and go to another store and get a different value. We spent so long working on this problem, and my instinct is that today you could basically just use Gemini 1.5 Pro out of the box to solve like that order of magnitude of problem in a really robust and reliable way. And I think to me, that's incredibly exciting because it means that you don't need to have the order of magnitude of resources of an Apple with a bunch of people with machine learning backgrounds. You can just be a developer who sees this problem and go and use these models off the shelf to do that. And I don't think we've seen like the explosion of like vision use cases of what's going to be possible with these models. And I think that's going to be really cool for this year of seeing like what new stuff people unlock. So I hope developers build cool things with those.
They will. I cannot wait to see it. It's Logan, we could keep on talking for another 2 hours. I do want to just say congratulations to you for this new role. It's a phenomenal role. Google's really lucky to have you. But also just, and I think I speak for Jaden too, like Gemini has just been great. Like it's just been, it's really kind of come up. It really took me off guard kind of thing, because I was expecting to be like, the 1.5 Pro, like I would upload entire books. It was doing extraordinary things. Super excited. And then this week has been an exciting week in Google. So again, congratulations to the team. Thanks for coming on, and to everybody who's listening right now. How can they find you, Logan? What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, Twitter or LinkedIn. Anywhere where you're seeing Connor or Jaden's content, I'm probably also there. So come hang out and see what the AI ecosystem. I think it's like it's so, and that's why I'm always appreciative that both of you do this work and have a podcast and work on getting this information out to the world. It's like, unless you're seeing the emerging trends and things that are happening, like you're just out of the loop, and like it's truly like a competitive disadvantage for people to not be listening to your podcast and following up with what both of you are doing. So I'm appreciative. Thank you for having me. And I can't wait for episode 3.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Logan. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day.
Thanks.